welcome to Hard Copy from our channel's television studios in Abuja. I'm Kayla Magwa. Nigeria is facing a humanitarian crisis, one that calls for urgent action or we will face the consequences of inaction. And I mean all of us. The World Food Programme has been forced to stop food support for nearly 1.4 million misplaced people in Nigeria. We're again pushing millions of our desperate youth into the open arms of Boko Haram. Food insecurity in Nigeria is imminent, according to the United Nations, as Nigeria joins hotspots of very high concern. Our people face extreme hunger and risk of starvation and death in the coming months unless there is urgent humanitarian action and a coordinated international effort to de-escalate conflict, stem displacement, and mount an urgent full-scale aid response. As a country, have we taken the lead on this issue? Have we? Or are we waiting for a crisis to start, then we begin to share rice in the village? The Minister of State for Humanitarian Affairs says more than 3 million Nigerians are internally displaced as a result of flooding, insecurity, and other natural disasters. 3 million Nigerians. How did we get here? And where do we go from here? We can't turn back time, yes, but is this damage fixable? World Humanitarian Day was held during the week with the theme Act for Humanity, highlighting the urgency in demanding protection, accountability, and action. And we are marking these demands, but are we being listened to? Or are we being ignored? Whether it's by terrorism, banditry, hunger, food disasters, boat mishaps, floods, Nigerians are dying in droves every day. What can be done differently to save the lives of our people? How can we get more Nigerians involved in local humanitarian efforts? Of the $255 million required for this year's operation, UNICEF received only $95 million. What's the plan to get the rest of the money? Mr. Mohamed Malik Fall of Senegal, the United Nations resident coordinator in Nigeria, joins us tonight as we try to understand this humanitarian crisis while proffering short, medium, and long-term solutions. We'll also discuss journalism and AI, the climate crisis as a human rights emergency, facing the same Nigerian challenges right now as UNRC that he faced as UNICEF representative in 2016, and Nigeria's macroeconomic environment, which one report states he said Tinubu's reforms are improving. All these and more tonight on Hard Copy. Mr. Fall, welcome to Hard Copy.
Thank you, Kayla, for having me in your program.
It's good to have you here with us. World Humanitarian Day was recently.
It was
yesterday. But you see, what that has done is open up the issues. So it does feel in many spheres like we don't take action before things happen. We don't prevent things from happening. It feels like things happen and then we start to look for solutions to these problems. Talk to us a little bit about some of the priorities, looking at World Humanitarian Day and what the United Nations thinks should be a priority for the Nigerian people and government.
First of all, thanks for having me in your program and greeting to all your viewers. Let me first put in context the World Humanitarian Day. It's not only for Nigeria, it's an international day, and it looks at the humanitarian crisis across the globe. And unfortunately, we are in a time where we have never seen such a kind of level of suffering, such a kind of level of humanitarian need, in a context where we are observing also a decline of solidarity, a decline of funding for humanitarian. That's the global context. The other one that I wanted to highlight, globally speaking, is the way humanitarian workers are being under attack. I think this year has recorded over 350 humanitarian workers killed on the line, in the line of duty. Everywhere, not only they are not protected, they are being killed, but the basic principle of international humanitarian law also are disregarded and are under attack. And we have seen it across the globe, whether it is in Ukraine, in Gaza, in Sudan, without mentioning some crises that have been protracted for decades, like the one of Somalia or South Sudan. This is the context in which we are celebrating. And that's why the celebration is first a call. First of all, it's a way to honor those humanitarian workers who on a daily basis work out of their way, take the risk of their life to go and save people's life.
I think it's important that people know that you used to be the UNICEF rep here. I think 2016
Indeed,
to 2019.
Yes.
And then now you're the UN resident coordinator. Can you help us draw a parallel between what our humanitarian situation was like back then and where we are right now? Are things better in your view?
Let me say that you have kind of change in the landscape.
Okay.
Like when I was UNICEF rep here, the highest concern in terms of conflict and security was in the Northeast, where you had the insurgency of Boko Haram, mostly affected 3 states, Yobe, Adamawa, and Borno. Then now you have the banditry and the insecurity, unfortunately, which have expanded significantly in the Northwest and affecting particularly the state of Zamfara, Kebbi, Sokoto, Katsina, even coming down to a certain extent to Kaduna. Then you have also the whole Middle Belt where you have intercommunal violence sometimes, which is really disruptive for people to access to livelihood, for people to access to economic opportunity. And I think those are the kind of change that I wanted to highlight. The other factor is that unfortunately, we are very slow, when I say we, humanity in general, in taking the right action to address the climate crisis. And every single day give us an indication that the situation is getting worse by the day. We have seen now flood coming. Last year, for example, 16 out of the 36 states have experienced significant flood. We have seen heat wave coming. We have seen droughts coming, and all of these things are compounding the crisis in which we are. And I think which is now the major trigger of displacement, of human suffering, of loss of life, of loss of livelihood. That's why I think we need to address these issues by working on the prevention, by working on durable solution. This abrupt funding cut is a wake-up call.
Okay.
It's a wake-up call to our host government, and in the case of Nigeria, to the government of Nigeria, to step in and find alternative way of financing the gap that we are facing. And I feel some kind of encouraging step in this direction. I was yesterday with the Minister of Environment. Okay. He mentioned to me the additional allocation that was made to his government, to his ministry. And today there was an emergency meeting to see how we can work with UNICEF and WFP to respond, to use those additional allocation to respond to the gap that we are facing. But I don't think it should be only a call to government. I think it could be also a call to private sector. Private sector need to engage, not only in terms of philanthropy, but also in terms of investment. Because when you talk to these displaced people, in Nigeria, but across the globe, I spent my year, maybe 30 years of my life working into humanitarian context. And every single opportunity I have to interact with the IDP or someone impacted by a crisis, when you ask them what you want most, what they will tell you is not to get handout, not to get assistance, but just to be helped to recover, to be helped to get back on their feet, to be helped to access to economic opportunity, to be helped to own their own destiny and recover their dignity. And I think in Nigeria that's the case also. Now, when it comes to containing the shock, there are 2 ways of doing it. You set up anticipatory action, because most of this flood or this shock, they take people by surprise. The Mokwa in Niger State happened at night, and people was completely submerged by the water at night. But I think if we dig deep, we will find that maybe if an early warning system was there, maybe if the settlement was not made in a place that is prone to attract water or to be flooded, probably some of the life could be saved. And this year, particularly, there was a massive investment on what we call anticipatory action. We have conducted with all the government specialized agencies like the NEMAT, like the agencies that deal with hydrology, with NEMA, with all the government agencies together with OCHA to prepare what we call anticipatory action plan. And those anticipatory action plans are supposed to set up the kind of say that can trigger an alert, that can send the early warning, that can help the population to be aware of the kind of risk they face where they settle in some areas. And I feel and believe that this year the impact will be much lesser than what we have experienced the past year because of this anticipatory. But that's not enough. I think what we need also is to build resilience in our policies. We need to put what we call disaster risk reduction, which should be part of also our policy and our programming. I think the combined approach that will invest on prevention, that will create the prerequisite that we need for longer term development, which is peace, which is resilience to shock, which is preparedness to shock, which is anticipatory action on shock. Those are the kind of things that we are investing massively, and I think moving forward we will go there. Now, in a context where we have less resources, but where we are calling for government to step in at resources they put for humanitarian assistance, where we ask private sector not to give charity or handout, but to invest in a way that can create economic opportunity or livelihood for the people who are in necessity. I think if we create those conditions, I am sure that moving forward we will see the suffering of the people going down.
You know what's strange? You're the third UN resident coordinator that I've interviewed. And you're the third person to say exactly the same thing as the last two. What's the holdup? Because when we now look at it, it does feel like the non-kinetic bit, when we look at the insecurity in this country, it does feel like the non-kinetic bit of this conflict. If Mr. Edward Callon, who was the first I interviewed, said the same thing, and the one just before you, and now you as well. So what's the problem? What's holding back countries like Nigeria from investing incredibly in the non-kinetic? Even from the military we hear this. So while we're doing kinetic things, poverty is still rife. And then you're trying to save the people who have no choice but to go into crime and criminality?
Kayla, you put your finger on the issues, because when we talk about non-kinetic, it's not only about the rhetoric of peace or the rhetoric of social or community mediation. It goes beyond that. Of course, the social cohesion is part of it, but the biggest part of it is also poverty alleviation. When the people are poor, they don't have hope. They don't see a future for themselves in their land. Then every adventure can take them away from positive behavior. Then to address the poverty, what you need is to get people to access to livelihood, to have something that helps them to protect their dignity, to have access to opportunities that help them to feed their family. But beyond that also, they need education. If you look at, for example, most of the area where you have this kind of violence prevailing, you look at the indicators prior to the start of the violence, you will see a lot of deprivation. Now, unless you go to those root causes, it's much easier to say than to do, because it requires investment. It requires development intervention. It requires, and not investment on a kind of one-time based approach, but investment that is steady, investment that attack the root causes of this situation. That's, I think, what we have, and that's why I'm saying that this is a journey. And one of the reasons why even in UN, in the adjustment of our cooperation framework, we have a particular focus in the Northwest. It's because the Northwest has a big demographic. If you take the 6 to 7 states, it's close to 60 million, maybe bigger than many countries in our continent, or most of the countries in our continent. But that demographic comes also with the highest number of deprivation, whether it is out of school, access to education, malnutrition, early marriage. How are we going to address all of those things, that's one of the challenges, and that's what is at stake. And I think unless we address those, non-connected approach wouldn't have a meaning. It will require that development intervention, and I think that's what my hope, that with the kind of leadership I'm seeing now in the country, we can get into that journey and we will get there.
We do have to go on a break, but when we come back, we'll be looking at after the conflict, because that's a part of this situation that we don't think about when we look at the humanitarian problem, is that after the conflict, we have to deal with the mental health of people who have been displaced. That in itself is a different kettle of fish, because when someone comes out of a conflict situation, they've been in IDP camps, they've been through one trauma or the other. What kind of care is being given to these people to make sure that they are functional Nigerians afterwards? And then we'll also be talking a little bit about journalism and AI, which is something you've been talking about, and then taking a look at some of the comments that you've made about the Tinubu administration and how it is working. We'll get to that shortly.
All right, okay.
Stay with us on Hard Copy. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Hard Copy. If you just joined us, the United Nations Resident Coordinator has joined us today, Mr. Mohammed Fall. Thank you so much for being with us on the program.
Thanks.
So that it won't be that I said it myself. Let me quote the paper. They said, oh yes, they were talking about the economy, and you said, for journalists, you should not only spotlight the problems and challenges Nigeria faces, but also highlight the progress and opportunities that abound in this country, you said. You should not only convey disaster and bad news, be conveyors of hope. Do you think our reportage as journalists in Nigeria is a little too harsh on the government?
I don't think when I made that statement, I was particularly targeting the journalists. I was just thinking that having lived twice in this country, I see potential, I see opportunity, not only for the development of the people of Nigeria, but for West Africa, but for even Sub-Saharan Africa. It has a private sector which is extremely vibrant and present across the continent. It has kind of talent in innovation that is felt everywhere. It's being said that even 20% of the startups in Sub-Saharan Africa are in Nigeria and based in Lagos. If you look at the art, the creativity industry, it's probably one of the most vibrant, not only in the continent, I could say even at global level. And that industry is creating jobs, is opening access to digital economy, is promoting the culture, not of Nigeria, but the continent. I think all of these things call us for a change of narrative. A narrative that make headline, which only emphasize the challenge, is not helpful for the country. Because let's say, for example, today, with this humanitarian assistance cut or the reduction of funding cut for development, Nigeria has a potential to finance its own development. But to do it, you have to help them to use the opportunity they have to attract investment. You have to help them to support the policy that is ongoing to increase maybe the fiscal space or improve the fiscal space so the revenue of the state can increase to a point that they can increase their investment on health, on education, on nutrition, on the services that are developing human capital. When I talk about change of narrative, that's what I meant. A narrative that really create and showcase the opportunity the country have, but not a narrative that only put the headline that emphasizes the challenge that could even keep away potential investor. I
mean, it's important to know that you're not just resident community coordinator, you're resident and humanitarian coordinator. So your outlook on things really comes from a place of humanitarian work. And of course, many years under your belt of doing that sort of work. Let me give you an opportunity to talk to the Nigerian right now. Priority areas for your office, and even for the UN generally. What are maybe top 3? I don't know how much, because we do have quite a lot of issues in this country, especially when it comes to humanitarian work. What are the top 3 that the UN is facing right now with Nigeria and these priority areas? What are you looking at? What are you seeing on ground with them?
First, to get into a race against the clock to save life. As I speak, you have over 3 million children in Nigeria who are on the edge of falling into severe and acute malnutrition. Severe and acute malnutrition increase by tenfold the risk of a child to die than if the child didn't have that situation. Some say that even we can reach up to 2,000 deaths per day if we don't address these issues. For me, that's one of the priority, and as we are talking in the context of the World Humanitarian Day, my call to the private sector, to the government, to the civil society, to the community is hand in hand to try to address that gap and to try to address the challenge that we have in front of us. If you discuss with Governor Zulum in Borno, he will literally tell you that maintaining these people in camp and giving them hands out generation after generation or years after year will even end up breaking their resilience and their ability to produce for themselves.
Handouts are not the answer.
Exactly. Handouts, we need to go beyond that. The second priority for me, how can we move from humanitarian to a medium and a longer term development? And the third priority is that Nigeria has a unique potential, which to me is in its demography. It's the biggest demography in the continent. Probably if you are counting young people in Nigeria, they could be maybe close to 100 or over 100 million. For me, that's a dividend. It's not a burden, provided that you make the right investment.
Speaking of AI, you said AI is reshaping journalism. It can empower fact-based reporting or accelerate disinformation, deepen surveillance and silence truth. AI must not become a tool that erodes trust or endangers journalists who face disproportionate risks online and offline.
When I brought this aspect, it's mostly coming from the whole thinking that is dominating in UN and led by our UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, where we see, as never before, humanity having potential to progress. AI should be always conceived and used as a public good. Now, that's one coin of AI, but you have the other coin that could be used in different way. I have been in meeting, like, for example, on anti-terrorism, where they show that now terrorists or insurgent or extreme violence group are using all this technology, but not for good. When you go to Borno today, you see that the insurgency is using drone, kamikaze drone, surveillance drone, which were not part of their warfare just a year ago. Now you take misinformation, you take disinformation, the kind of harm it can do is something also that we should be controlling. But now it's our responsibility, the responsibility of government, the responsibility of United Nations, the responsibility of leadership to make sure that we have governing bodies that really make sure that these remain public good, but not tools that can do harm or that tool that can be used for the contrary of the purpose that it was founded for.
So no UN agency, as we wrap up, no UN agency is leaving Nigeria, just so we can verify that.
No UN agency is leaving Nigeria.
But you will have a smaller footprint. As we wrap up, how will you be able to meet up with all of the great work that you do in countries like Nigeria with a smaller footprint, lesser funding? How are you going to get that done? Definitely,
we have been impacted by this current situation that I spoke about, decline of ODA, decline of humanitarian assistance, and this will require that through different agencies that mark our footprint here, we do the adjustment, because we can't employ people we can't pay, we can't deliver services we cannot afford. What will happen, and this is, you give me an opportunity to talk about one point, because when I say that this funding cut is an opportunity for UN, for government to step in. It's a wake-up call for them, but it is a wake-up call for us too, because maybe it's time for us to be more efficient. Maybe it's time for us to look at the kind of transaction we have and how to reduce costs. And I can tell you that we are already in it. Like, for example, localization. Everyone talks about it, but we are demonstrating that when you rely on local organization, sometimes you spend less and you get great reach. Last year, for example, what we call the Nigerian Humanitarian Fund, 59 to 60% of our fund was given to local organization, but that gave us, and we did a study, by the way, it gave us a share, an increase in efficiency by 20%. Let's say, for example, shifting from in-kind donation instead of WFP using truck full of bag of rice or full of goods, you give to people electronic wallet and you accredited shop where they can go. And that will cut maybe by 1/3 the cost of the operation that we are making. Increasing and reinforcing coordination, because everyone knows also that we operate through implementing agencies, through different agencies at national level, subnational level, and sometimes the lack of coordination can lead to overlap, lead to duplication, and all of these things are affecting our efficiencies. I think it's a call to action also for us to be more efficient and to be more effective.
Well, that's a good place to anchor.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Mr. Muhammad
Thank you.
Malik Fowl for being with us on Hard Copy. Hope to see you again soon.
Hope to see you also, and thank you, by the way, for giving us the opportunity to speak to you, to speak to your viewer. I think in this context we are today, the UN voice and everyone's voice need to be heard, but most importantly, the hard work of the humanitarian workers,
Indeed.
the risk they are taking, and the life they are losing, those need to be known by the great public. But the people they are serving also, the suffering they are going through, the need we have to join hands to come in response and assist them in a way that is more durable is something also that we need to be heard. And thanks for giving us that space.
You're welcome. That's Hard Copy this week. I'm Kayla Megwa. Good night.